Hello folks, and welcome to a new build, the building of the Cloud Walker, a vintage inspired model with a wingspan of 65 inches. I'm building this for a fellow clubmate who was a little bit intimidated by it, but I hope by putting this little build video together that he'll be less intimidated in the future and can tackle this sort of thing himself. And hopefully people who are looking at these videos will otherwise be put off might think, yeah, I could do that. It's fairly reasonable. So what have I done? Well, before we actually start cutting or sticking, the first thing I've done is I've actually sorted out the 6mm cross square strips by weight. I've weighed them. 9 gram, 7 gram, 6 gram and 4 gram. The 9 gram is obviously the stiffest, and I'll use that wood one piece each side to keep it even, so that when you're bending it and pulling it around, it doesn't pull more one way than the other. The lighter weight material, the 4 gram stuff, I'll use towards the rear of the model, because obviously most models tend to be tail heavy if you're not very careful, so I can use the wood to my advantage, and it only takes a few moments to do that. If you don't have scales to weigh accurately, you can actually just pick the weight up and feel it in your hand, and you'd be surprised how much you can tell light wood from heavy wood. And you can also flex it to see how it bends. So that's the timber. The design of this basically follows a central core to which you add formers to give the round shape. So this is the instruction book. Some of the translation from whatever language it started at is a bit funny, but the photographs probably say it all. So the first thing we're going to do is build this central core and then put the two sides together, to which the rest of the structure basically hangs off. Before I do that, however, if I just show you this, and we'll just pause and we'll go a little closer. So here we have the nose area of the model, and at this stage, when you come to put it together, you have to decide whether you're going with electric or IC. Roy's chosen electric, so we need this piece for the nose. There will also need to be a piece added inside, which I'll show you in a second. And on the first video, when I sort of got into this and opened it all up, I did comment on how nicely it was all laser cut, and it really just pops together and holds itself together. I was tempted to just do that and run sear down the joints, but because it's such a strong shape to begin with, I'm going to add to that by using some PVA glue, some white glue. Now, the reason I'm doing this now is if I start it, put it to one side, it'll be well dry by the time both the sides are done, and then we can add the nose to this central core of the fuselage. Let's get cracking. So I'm applying some PVA glue into the joints, and also along the point to which this platform will be attached. And then I'll add the platform. And then just run a brush down the joint. And these bottom pieces, which hold the undercarriage, A8 and A9, the smaller one of the two goes to the front, and that's going to go into here. Now, while there's a little bit of flex in it, I can pop it into position I'm adding the glue along here. And then this has, when we come to build the fuselage later on, as you'll see, it has cheeks added to it to give you the shape. You can hear it clicking, which is always an encouraging sound. And doing the same with this next piece. Now, when I built my own version of this, I was a bit concerned that the fuselage looked a little bit lightweight. I wasn't sure it would be up to the job, and I wasn't sure about this method of attaching it all. But I've flown it some time now. It's a nitro model. It's taken my landings, no problem. So I don't think you need to worry about it. And then just run the glue along that joint, keeping it nice and neat. And then this one gets added on there. And very quickly, with a nice rigid structure, I'll show you the extra piece that's going to be required. And I noticed there we go. Get all wet here. Of course, I'm trying to get all of the parts in at once. That's it. Start to go. There you go. And one little piece at the front. I'm going to run some glue down the joints. Additional glue. That's going nowhere. And this is the front piece. Just apply the glue. And as I say, this could easily be done with CA glue. Just lock it together dry and then let the CA run into the joint. And I use it quite often. I know there's a bit of a debate whether the CA in time will become brittle, but I haven't found it to be so. Now, that will form the compartment for the battery, which I suspect will be a 2200. And if I grab the motor will go. This isn't the motor, it's too small, this. Roy's ordered his motors. Motor goes there, so it will need another bulkhead here. But that's not a big deal, that can be added later on. I'll set that to one side. And so it's time now to start putting this together. I've put some food wrap down to preserve the plant so it doesn't get damaged. Can I just point this out, which strikes me as very odd. If you are going for the nitro version, they've got the fuel tank here, and obviously the engine's here. And the fuel tank, in this case, is about 2 inches below the carb height. If you do that, you're always going to have a nightmare. Let's go a little bit closer. That's never going to work. You're going to have all kinds of issues with the fuel delivery to the engine. The tank needs to go here. And in the version that I've built, that's exactly where I put it. And it protrudes into this cabin area, and which is handy because you can see how much fuel you're putting in when you get fueled up for a session. That's never going to work. Why it was put there is beyond me. But if you are going for the IC version, you can't really follow that as instructions. If it was a petrol engine, it'd be a different matter because most of them have Warbro carbs on them and it's a self-pump basically. But that'll never work with a nitro engine, just an aside. So, we've got that down. And as I said, I've sorted the wood out and I've got two 9-gram pieces, lengths. Now, I don't want to put both of them on the same side. I'll put one on the upper level of this side, and when I make the next side, I'll use the 9-gram on the upper level there as well. It just keeps things balanced, I think. So you need to look carefully at what we're doing here. And it's been carefully thought out because the length just about matches the length of wood required on the plan, and this is the point at which the stick part of the model comes in contact with the part that I've just put together. So I'm going to pin it down, and I'm going to avoid putting pins into the wood as much as possible. I'm not saying I won't, but I'm avoiding it as much as possible. And what I'm pinning into here, it's a plasterboard, which is nice and flat. I've actually screwed it to a plywood base, but it comes in flat sheets, and as long as you don't store it stood up against a wall, it'll remain flat. And it takes a pin nicely. For many years, I would simply knock the pins in with a hammer into a plywood board, which was not a lot of fun at times. And then I saw Cliff Harvey doing this. I thought, why did I never think of that? So anyway, we all have moments, I'm sure. So I'm pinning this down, get it nice and secure, running with the, and I'm basically wedging it between two pins all the way along. And I'm going to take a piece of the 7-gram, which is the next heaviest and therefore the next strongest, and I'm going to pin that. Now I've noticed there's a knot, a fault in the wood, so I'm not going to use that piece. I'll use a different piece which hasn't got any weakness in it. This is the lower one. Now I've marked on, I've written onto these pieces of wood. Now I don't know whether Roy intends covering this in clear or opaque, and just because I'm unsure, I'm going to take care to make sure that any writing that appears on the parts isn't visible. It just spoils the whole look of the model. And it's a strong design, this, because instead of vertical joiners between the upper and the lower Longdon, they're going for diagonal ones, which takes a bit more care in the cutting, yes, definitely, but it also makes for a much stronger design in my opinion. As I said, I think these are well thought out kits. I have no affiliation with them, so I'm not saying it because they've asked us to, but I've built one before. This is the second one. The first one I built, actually, had been started and it wasn't all packed away like that, so I never saw what it originally came like. As I recall, the wings had been partly made, one wing had been made. So somebody's loss was my gain. So there we have the upper and lower core to the fuselage done. I'm going to use the 6 gram to start for the front part, and as I get towards the rear I'm going to use the slightly lighter material. And here we go. I think I might do this as a time lapse because you'll get bored watching me doing this, I'm sure. I'll cut this, put that on the board there. Fresh blade, should cut okay. Let's check the cut. It's a little bit long, which I don't mind. Still a little bit long. Need to get a pencil rather than a pen. That line I'm drawing is far too thick. There we go. And this is, I'm going to use, CA glue to glue this together. So there's that of CA. And this is thin, so the capillary reaction of the CA runs in nicely to the joint. It will end up sticking to the plastic, but it pulls off. And I'll just repeat that all the way along, and we'll do that as a time lapse so you can see it being done. I've paused it there because I'm going to switch to the lighter material now. I might as well take advantage of it. So I'm going to go with a 4 grams, piece of balsa, and carry on and finish off doing this side of the inner core with the lighter material towards the rear, because obviously the CG is here and anything behind that we'll want to keep the weight down if we can. So I've got the strength from the slightly heavier wood here, and I think I can get away with the lighter material towards the rear. And I've stopped that E19, 1 down from there, and after that I'm going with the lighter material. That's one side done, barring the insert of these parts, A33, which are the guides for the push rods for the control surfaces. So I'll cut this out. And I can tell you now that that pops out beautifully. Minimum of hacking away, obviously very well laser cut. And if you look at the edges, I don't know if that's visible. It's difficult there. They're not badly burned, which to me is a good sign. It hasn't been overdone. Right, that's a nice neat fit. I'm going to leave the print on the inside for the reasons I've just indicated. I'm going to put it in, pull that together, and I'm just going to zap the C around the edge. And that's one side now complete. Job done. I need to repeat that. You don't need to see it, I'll do that off camera. And then we'll start looking at putting the two sides together. It's starting to take shape very quickly, isn't it? Coffee time. As you can see, I hope, that's one piece produced, one side produced. And what I intend doing now is repeating the process to produce the other side. Now there is a train of thought, some people do this, that they'll use this as the guide for the next side to make sure that they're exactly the same. You simply repeat the process, but this time put a piece of non-sticky substance. I use food wrap between the two and pin them directly on. I'm quite confident that I can model that exactly the same as that without going to that extent, but it's an option that some people do. So I'll crack on, make the other side, and then we look at the next stage of the process. Sutty's come to help. Neighbourhood cat that moved in. Oh well, coffee and then back to the grind. What do you think, Sutty? You're going to knock that off, aren't you? What a so-and-so. Both sides have now been made. There we go. And now it's about pulling those sides together. And the first thing I'm going to do is to mark on the position of the cross pieces, which are, bear with me, here they are, A25 through to 29, and they are going to provide support on the upper surface and lower surface. There are 5 pairs. I'll cut those out in a second, but before I do so, I'm going to mark on the position on each of these sides, which will help keep everything square. So if I line that up, there we go. It's a little bit more awkward because I went longer than I needed to. So, what am I looking for? A25, A26, A27, 28, and 29. And that, of course, is the last one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a square and just line up, make sure I've got those correct. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll transfer them to the other side. And I'll show you how I'm going to approach it. So let's just make sure they're square. Well, there you go. Straight off they're not. So put a little triangle on so I know that that's the correct one. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Get a little bit more accurate. It's okay. Oh, right, so that's all those marked. I'm going to transfer them onto this side now. Just doing the upper surface and then I'll transfer that line through. Okay, and then same thing again. This top one's a straight line, this is slightly curved to the lower level. Now, for those who haven't got the next bit of kit, the way to go is to actually invert this, because that's flat, remember, I've just said, and do it upside down on the building board, and pull it in thusly, like that. Yeah, that's the way to go. Now, you can do it like that, or you can use, just put it with me, a building jig such as this. And the advantage of the building jig is it ensures that everything's kept square. And you use these right angles to line everything up and make sure that they're even all the way. I'm going to use this, but it is possible to use just the plan. In fact, I don't need the plan at all to do this. Now I've transferred those marks over. So I'm going to cut out all of the 5 pairs, and there are a couple of little pieces for the rear. I'll show you them now. So this is the lower piece, A32, and A31 is the upper piece, and these notches need to be lined up carefully with this rearmost position here. Zoom into it. Here, although this isn't marked, this must be 31A because this piece notches into it, and that provides the platform for the horizontal stabilizer to sit on. So I'm going to get these glued on. I'll show you how I'm going to do that, and then we'll get this jigged up. Here you can see that I've glued those triangulated parts that pull the rear of the fuselage into position. I've marked them carefully on the plan. This notched piece is your guide, and now this end needs to be tapered so that both of the sides can be nipped together at this point. So I'll do that, and then we'll get the jig set up. I've had a thought with this. Rather than gluing it all on the jig, I think I can get a lot of the preliminary work done before I even resort to that. So perhaps you don't even need to worry about the jig at all. There's a taper on each of the parts. It's more pronounced. You can see it on part 829. You can see the taper rearward. So I'm going to use this and get these glued in position on one side, flat on the board, and I'll use the square to ensure that they are square. But you can see that's standing up by itself, a testament to the quality of the laser cutting. I'm going to glue them in place, then we'll tip it up and see how it pulls together. I've glued these rear parts in now, so let's see. It's in the centre. There's the matching part. Yeah, I'm going to glue that in as well. Keeping the taper towards the rear. Goes on the lower edge. Lining it up carefully with the So that's one side. Oh, managed to stick to the board. That's one side done. Now, in theory, all I need to do is pull these together. Now, you could, if you haven't got a jig, just simply pin those in position and they should stay put. But because I've got a jig and it supports the whole structure, I'm going to put this onto the jig before I glue these on. And they'll go like that. It's just a case of pulling them in line and zapping them with a CA. Okay, I'll get the jig set up and we'll see how it goes together. Let's try and show you how this thing works. So, it's basically a board with that you have to get yourself. You get this sticky paper and you put the bolts underneath and you get these what appear to be moulded right angles. I mean, you could fabricate something like this very, very easily. It's got T-nuts underneath yourself if you can be bothered. But I picked this up, somebody passed it on actually, they weren't using it. And the way to use it is, you have to mark on the centre point of the fuselage at given points. So you can see here, there's a little pen mark on 25A, there's a little pen mark on 26A, and so on. And then what you do is, just bear with me, you set up one side, and then I'm going to put the other side in and push them up to this centre line. I've got it, I'm lining up that little mark with this centre line, and that'll give you an absolutely square fuselage. And once it's all jigged up, then I'll apply the glue. So I'm going to carry on and do that, and then we'll see how it all looks. Well, there you have it, all glued up. It takes longer to set up the jig, not a great deal of time, than it does to glue it with CA. I'm confident that this is square, using the centre line marked on each of the formers and lining that up with a line on the jig. I'm confident I have a square fuselage now. And before I lift it off, it makes sense to take advantage of this while it's all nice and square to glue this together. So I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. Get that glued up, and then I can ensure everything is square. I am going to mark on a centre line down the centre of here first to take advantage of the jig, and I'll set up an extra set of pieces here to push it in. I'll mark that off and we'll get it put in place. Here we go then. Time to take this off the board and see how we've done. Obviously, you only need to take one side off. I'm confident we've got square fuselage there, or the core of the fuselage. You see this one comes from that, or into a formers that we had, the next page. And that gives it this nice streamlined look. So, push this into the thing from the board. That's a big deal. Come on, stand up. Oh, that's a big deal. Stuck more to the cling film than it has to the wood, but we can sort that out quickly now. I will go around all of these joints because you can't be guaranteed that the glue's going to penetrate, as it obviously didn't there. But there we go. Quite happy with that. Don't know if you can see it actually. Let's zoom out a bit. And that little foobar's fixed. There we have a square, true fuselage core ready for the formers to be glued around. These little bits here will come off, no problem. I'm going to wrap this video now because that's the first part of the fuselage done. In the next part, we'll start giving it some shape. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what's wrong with you? Take care, get flying. If you can't get flying, let's get creative. Bye for now.